Welcome back to TMZ Live. There is a new show premiering tonight on television, and that would be Black News Tonight with Marc Lamont Hill, and it is on the Black News channel, and it is really interesting. In particular, Marc is really interesting because he thinks that there is a lack of understanding of news that affects Black people in traditional white media, that they have an unconscious bias, that they don't cover it properly. And this becomes an outlet where Black people can get news that affects their lives from people who understand it better. So let's bring Marc in right now. He's joining us live. Marc, welcome to TMZ Live.
Oh, man, thanks for having me. Always good to see you, man.
Great seeing you, and congratulations on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited. This is a big night.
So I'm fascinated by what you've said about the hole in the market that allows for a show like this. Explain what's lacking in traditional media.
So there's a couple things, right? One thing is that's lacking in traditional media is this type of stories that we cover. You know, for example, if a Black girl goes missing in the hood, she's just gone. A white girl, we will look for and locate for years, months, decades until we find her, as we should. There might be an issue that is pertinent in our community, whether it's political issue or a cultural issue. I mean, for example, the Amazon workers organizing and unionizing in Alabama, or something going on with the vaccine in across the United States in terms of who has access to it. These are things that are specific to us, and sometimes mainstream media doesn't cover it. The other question, though, is how do we cover it? What questions do we ask? Are we looking for the right people? Do we pull out the same usual suspects to answer the questions? That's the other piece, because sometimes you can cover the right story, but cover it wrong.
I understand what you're saying, but I'm wondering, after George Floyd, in my mind, a lot changed. I mean, when you watch cable news, it is populated now by people who are part of the Black community, leaders in the Black community. And, you know, it seems to me, and I don't know how you feel, it seems to me the coverage of George Floyd has been really kind of centered around all of that, and a consciousness change. Do you agree with that, or do you still think there's this unconscious bias the way it's being reported?
I think it's the same. I mean, it's kind of like a cheating boyfriend. You know, they'll be good when they get caught for a little bit, but eventually, you know, the summer happens, people get more comfortable and they go back to what they do. Remember when Mike Brown was killed in 2014 and the coverage changed, everything shifted, and then we discovered Donald Trump. And suddenly for the next 4 years, we weren't talking about state violence. We weren't talking about police shootings. We were talking about Donald Trump and whatever he said or whatever he tweeted. Now we're having a different dynamic going on with George Floyd. And I think you're right. There is more energy. There's more attention. But we can't continue to trust that news outlets are going to cover us based, you know, because that's often based on what's profitable, what they can get advertising off of. It's not based on a principle. And so we need to have a different kind of conversation. And then the second piece of it really quickly is, even when we're covering George Floyd, again, what kinds of questions are we asking? It's important to talk about the trial, to cover the trial, but I also want to talk about the protesters. I also want to talk about the defunding movement that's still going on, even though the media tells us that people aren't talking about it anymore. I want to talk about some of the organizing actions happening on the ground. I want to think about all of those things. I want to ask different questions at the same time that we cover the mainstream. And the mainstream media should be applauded for what they're doing with George Floyd. I'm very happy that there's so much coverage. I'm just not confident it will continue.
Marc, what's ultimately your goal with the network and with your show?
You know, Black News Channel, BNC, our goal is to cover every dimension of Black life, everything that Black people are talking about, not just from one political position, but from across the board. And with my show, I want to expand what counts as news. Too often when we talk about news, we're only talking about politics. I'm going to cover politics, but I also want to talk about that verses last night. I also want to figure out why we had to do 2 R. Kelly songs last night. I want to talk about Tyrese's wild tweets from the verses. You know what I'm saying? I want to put that in the same conversation with international news that's going on in Ethiopia and that's going on in Rwanda. And I want to put that in conversation with what's going on with President Biden or with the vaccines. Black people are diverse. We're interesting, we're dynamic, we're all the things. And I want to put together a show, Black News Tonight, that covers all the things.
You ain't getting out of here without talking about the Isley Brothers now that you mentioned it. So, oh no, I'm dying to know. So do you think they crossed the line? Because it was their song, he produced it. You think they crossed the line, or was it appropriate?
It crosses the line, man. I mean, The Isley Brothers have a catalog that is so deep. They could have done 3 verses without doing that song. And the idea that we have to bring in the song of the person who abuses young girls, allegedly, I don't, you know, I use allegedly because I don't know the legal status of it, but R. Kelly's a monster, and there's no reason to do a song with his background vocals, which you could hear on one of the songs, or that is so directly associated with him. And this is where, again, protecting Black girls is important. If he were accused, if R. Kelly were accused of doing harm to little boys because of our homophobia, because of our triggers, we would have canceled him a long time ago. If R. Kelly were doing harm to white women, he would have been taken off the streaming networks long before he actually was. There's a way that there's a permissibility to the harm that happens to Black girls that we have to stop. And so I say, get rid of all the R. Kelly music. We don't have to bring up R. Kelly every time there's a verses, especially with the Isley Brothers. This isn't somebody whack that has like 10 songs. They don't have a choice. You know what I mean? We can do without him.
I love your voice. I just think, by the way, I love the tone of your voice, but I also love what you say.
I appreciate it.
No, it's
I'm no Ron Isley.
Okay, fair way of
I
ending
thought
it.
he meant you had a nice voice, Mark. That's what I thought he meant.
I was going to take it either way.
No, it really sounds super interesting. It is Black News Tonight with Marc Lamont Hill on Black News Channel. Airs tonight. That's the debut, weeknights on BNC. Mark, thank you so much. And again, congratulations.
Always good to see you too.